What's up YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we're going to look at the results from the recent Limitless Invitational 2021, which was an online PTCGO tournament held that featured 70 of the top players from the 2021 Limitless Online Tournament Series. We'll be focusing on the first place deck and a top 4 deck, since they were anti-meta decks, and first place only featured 2 new cards from Chilling Reign, and the top 4 Spiritomb deck featured 0 new cards from Chilling Reign. So these were not the decks kind of picked to win going into the event. And it's also an interesting dynamic since it was 70 of the top players invited to this tournament, so it was a smaller population and a more condensed metagame possibly. So we'll be looking at these results and these lists and talking about kind of the implications it will have on tournaments coming up in the near future, and also why these decks were good selections for the tournament. Before we get into that though, shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place for you to get PTCGO codes. Be sure to use code CELIO for 5% off. Also, my new sponsor is PokemonCard.io, a great deck building website, and you can find all of my standard format decks on there at the link in the description down below. So now let's get into this. We'll be taking a look at Haru Nishikawa's Decidueye Inteleon deck, which went undefeated in the Limitless Invitational and got first place. And also Stefano Bassis's Spiritomb deck, which got third place or top 4 in the Limitless Invitational. Now, something also interesting we'll just briefly look at, there were 4 Decidueye decks and all of them made top 8. And there was one Spiritomb deck, and that one Spiritomb deck made top 8. So let's actually start with Spiritomb. We'll end it with the first place deck. So Spiritomb, this is actually the deck I played to last year's Limitless Invitational and got second. And well, not exactly this deck, of course, it was a different format, but I played a Spiritomb focused deck last year to the Limitless Invitational and got second, as well as my friend Kevin, who played the same Spiritomb deck and got first last year. So it was looking like there could almost be Spiritomb winning the only 2 ever Limitless Invitationals, but it got third, but pretty close still for Spiritomb. Just a little fun fact, I was excited to see Spiritomb doing well. So Spiritomb, I think, was a good meta call for the tournament because it hits Shadow Rider Calyrex and Trevenant Dusknoir for weakness. Anguish Cry, you build up 5 damage counters on it, and Anguish Cry does 320 to a Dark Weak Pokemon. And that's without even adding in that, you know, with Toughness Cape, you can have 5 more damage counters on and do a lot more damage. So it can one-shot tag teams and it can one-shot Dark Weak VMAXs, which is really great because Shadow Rider is the best card from the new set. It's the most hyped deck. It's the deck that everybody's expecting to be at the top. So this was a great call, I think. A little iffy because Eternatus is also a top contender, and Eternatus has Zigzagoons and single price Pokemon that can take care of Spiritomb. So that could definitely be a little bit of a worry for me if I was considering Spiritomb for this event. But if you're expecting metagames to still be full of tag team Pokemon and Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, and maybe not a lot of the new Rapid Strike Inteleon that can also take care of your Spiritombs, then maybe this could be a good call for an upcoming tournament for you. I do think it's a risky play though, because like I mentioned, the Eternatus has Zigzagoons, and then there's other decks running the new Rapid Strike Inteleon that can ping 20 damage at a time and just finish off a Spiritomb, because Spiritomb needs to have a lot of damage on itself to actually do damage. So there definitely are risks to playing a deck like Spiritomb, but obviously, as you can see, there's also rewards. Now, Haru Nishikawa played Decidueye, and there were 4 Decidueyes in the tournament. Like I said, all of them made top 8, and finals was Decidueye versus Decidueye. The one with Inteleon in it came out on top, and I think this list is quite good. It's still very good post the tournament. So you'll see that they played 2 Big Parasol. So Big Parasol prevents effects of attacks done to all of your Pokemon if the Pokemon it's on is in the active. Now this is really important because Shadow Rider Calyrex has a natural counter to Decidueye in its V's second attack, which puts 5 damage counters on 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Decidueye reads that it cannot be damaged by VNGX Pokemon, but you can affect it, so damage counters are an effect. Excuse me. So, the big Parasol protects all of your Decidueyes from the Astral Barrage, I believe it's called, on Shadow Rider Calyrex V, which is their soft answer to the Decidueye decks. So playing 2 big Parasol means even if the Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX play Tool Scrappers, you can get 1 Tool Scrapper and just put down the next one. Also note, it is even, let's say they play Tool Scrapper, it is a slow grind to knock out the Decidueyes with the Astral Barrage attack, because it's 5 damage counters on 2 things at a time. And I have played the matchup on the side of Shadow Rider against Decidueye decks not playing Big Parasol, and I can comfortably say if they had the Inteleon in their deck to boost their damage output by either 20 or 40 per turn, I would not have had the time I needed to win. Because with the quick shooting ability also adding damage to the board, your 5 damage counters that you're putting on 2 things at a time is really getting outsped by the Splitting Arrow doing 90, 20, 20, and then the Inteleon doing an extra 20 or an extra 40 as well. Not to mention, if they get a Malolana at the right time, they're going to heal more than 2 turns worth of Astral Barrage on one of their Decidueyes. And Shadow Rider decks are running 1 or 0 Cresselias at the moment, so there are no single press attackers to hit with. So in the decks going into this meta, this just looks like it beats Shadow Rider every time. Even if they're playing a Tool Scrapper, I would still feel confident with this list going against Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX. That being said, I haven't played a ton against this build or against Decidueye at all in the Chilling Reign meta, but from my experience in the couple matchups, one of them being the Shadow Rider versus Decidueye matchup that I mentioned, I imagine that Inteleon helps you outspeed some of the other counters that could be around. Just single prize Pokemon being used to hit into Decidueyes, or even Aegislash without the ADP buff potentially, things like that. Anything with a shred attack like Aegislash does have, I think Inteleon can help you either match or outspeed. Also, of course, you know, the Drizzle and the Inteleon from Sword and Shield are giving you a little bit of extra consistency, as opposed to the Jirachi engine, which the Decidueye has mostly been running up until now. So I think this list is really great. I had seen some things like it from Ho-Ho News in, you know, the videos and streams where we look through all the decks from Japan, but I didn't really take note of it, and I hadn't looked at it since I started playing in the Chilling Reign meta, so I did not recognize it for having the potential that it looks like it does have after all, since it went 8-0-2 and won this pretty prestigious online event. So I think the 2 big Parasols were really, really good. Not only just because you might prize it, but so it's easier to draw into, and then if you don't draw into it, you just get it with your Drizzle's shady dealings. And also, the 1 Malolana seems a lot less lucky to have for the deck when you have Drizzle and Inteleon that can just instantly search it instead of trying to get it with a Jirachi. So yeah, I'm a very big fan of this deck because it also adds another layer to Decidueye. It's not just get a Decidueye out in the active and hope they don't have a counter anymore. Now it's, yeah, you could still do that, but you're also now setting up the Inteleon potentially in some matchups, and you also have the big Parasol to help protect you from possible counters that the opponent might have. So I am a big fan of this deck, and I think it was a great meta call because all eyes were on Shadow Rider Calyrex, Ice Rider Calyrex, and Eternatus, for, in my opinion at least, and a little bit of Urshifu. But I do think most of the attention was on the 2 Calyrex and Eternatus. And if we'll look at the Ice Rider decks, I'm going to assume they don't really have counters in them, or things that can attack, I should say. They do have Chinchinos, they can hit for 40 a turn. But that's not really going to do it. Now, some decks might have had the Inteleon line. Look at that, we got lucky. The first one I clicked on had Inteleon. So some might have the Inteleon line, but the Decidueye also has its own Inteleon line. kind of matching that. So if they're only going to be hitting you for 70 for 2 energy plus a quick shooting or 2 every turn, you're hitting them for just as much or more with your Decidueye and your own Inteleon. Plus, you have Malolana in your deck. Now, they also have Cheryl, but if they're Cheryling their Inteleon that they're using to attack, then they have to rebuild it. They could also use this Inteleon to attack, which is actually a quite good option, but it is getting 2-shot by Inteleons, by Decidueyes, by Decidueyes. And it can even get hit by a Decidueye and then cleaned up in a few turns with Inteleons if the opponent can't get energy. So some soft possible answers with the Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX decks that include Inteleon, but really the most popular decks don't have great answers to Decidueye. And we can also look at what Haru's matchups were. It looks like they had a natural tie round 1 to a control deck. And then they beat Shadow Rider, Pikarom, Shadow Rider, Decidueye Mirror, and then tied probably an intentional draw here to go into top cut against Zacian Lucametal. And then in top cut, they beat Shadow Rider, Spiritomb, and Decidueye. So they really did hit a pretty concentrated meta. They hit Mirror Match. They hit 4 Shadow Rider Calyrex, then a couple tag team decks, and then that one rogue control that they saw. And we can also look and see what the Spiritomb played against here as well. So the Spiritomb hit an Eternatus early on, and then hit Shadow Rider, Lucametal, Shadow Rider. And then from there on out, it was Decidueye. So I think these players prepared for a specific meta, and looks like they did hit what they were intending to. Of course, if you want to look at all the results and what all 70 players played, you can find that on play.limitlesstcg.com. I'm not sponsored by Play.Limitless. I'm just a fan of what they do, so I always want to make sure I'm getting that information out there. So, yeah, typically after Decidueye does well, players start countering it. So they'll put tool scrappers, they'll put single prize attackers, things like that. But I'm not sure that like I said, I don't think a simple tool scrapper in your Calyrex deck will always be beating this Decidueye Inteleon build, because Decidueye is still a pretty efficient attacker when you're adding any extra damage from Inteleon against your opponent's Calyrex V that can't evolve, so it has to stay at its 210 or 220 base HP, and it has to use 3 energy to do 50 and 50 a turn. Pair that with your Malolana, pair that with your Syncate to get back your Malolana. I actually think it's still favorable for Decidueye Inteleon once Tool Scrapper is added to the Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX. I imagine only time will tell, but I do think Decidueye Inteleon could become a mainstay of the format. Spiritomb, I do think, was a little bit more of a wild card because, like I said, there's a lot of Inteleon engines, there's Zigzagoons and Eternatus. I do think Spiritomb might stay rogue. I do predict that it will stay a rogue deck, but the Decidueye Inteleon might become a mainstay of the format, so we'll just have to wait and see how that turns out. That's all I have to talk about today. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content if you enjoyed the video, and check out my sponsors PotownStore.com and PokemonCard.io. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.